I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey with your Hour News Now Rewind. Stories making headlines the week ending January 22nd, 2011. Our top stories include: Republicans carry out their promise and vote to repeal the national health care law in the House of Representatives. The president hosts the leader of China in Washington to talk about human rights and U.S. debt. A bomb is found near a Martin Luther King parade route in Spokane, Washington. A Philadelphia doctor is charged with 8 murders, committed in what investigators described as an urban house of horrors. Former Haitian dictator Baby Doc Duvalier comes back home after 25 years and is arrested. And a soldier for diversity in the newspaper business passes away. Republican members of the House of Representatives carry out their threat and vote to repeal the national health care law that's just a little over a year old. But the vote may be a little bit more than theater, as it still faces a roadblock in the Senate and the Barack Obama veto pen. The vote was 245 to 189 in favor of repeal, with 3 Democrats joining the entire Republican caucus in the majority.
We also believe that this bill is detrimental to job creation in this country. We believe that it's bad for the economy, and we are going to begin to deliver on posing an alternative and better way for the American people.
But Republican plans to replace the law are still vague. Meanwhile, more states have filed lawsuits claiming the new law to be unconstitutional. While a new poll finds that most Americans are against repealing the health care law, 46 to 41%. The NBC Wall Street Journal poll also finds that health care is the 3rd most important issue to Americans, behind the economy and the deficit. Well, the president had the economy on his agenda as he had face-to-face talks with the leader of the country that is the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt, China. President Hu Jintao was in Washington to meet with Barack Obama on a variety of issues, including Taiwan, human rights, and the economy. Hu Jintao was a guest of honor at the state dinner, then met with business leaders from around the country. The president has said that U.S.-Chinese relations could be the most significant in decades to come. President Hu said the relationship must be one of, quote, mutual respect. Hu was specific about tensions over Taiwan, Tibet, and economic policies. Well, during a week when most of the country was commemorating the birth of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the FBI is looking for the person or persons responsible for placing a bomb near an MLK parade route in Spokane, Washington. The explosive device was found in a black backpack and later diffused and detonated without any injuries. Authorities say the device could have killed or injured many people if it had gone off. They also say it was equipped with a remote detonation device. Investigators say while they have no suspects at this time, they do confirm that white supremacist activity in the Northwest has been on the rise. In Philadelphia, a 69-year-old doctor is accused of killing 7 babies and 1 patient in what investigators describe as an urban house of horrors. Prosecutors say Dr. Kermit Gosnell made millions of dollars over 30 years, performing what they describe as illegal late-term abortions. Investigators also say that his office was riddled with bags and bottles that contained fetuses and body parts.
They learned that in case after case, Dr. Gosnell and his assistants induced labor, forced the live birth of viable babies in the 6th, 7th, and 8th month of pregnancy, and then killed those babies by cutting into the back of their necks with scissors and severing their spinal cords.
9 of the doctor's employees were also charged. In Detroit, police arrest a man in a serial rape case that had women petrified in the eastern part of the city. 7 women have been attacked in the area that's just a few miles from downtown. The victims range in age from their early teens to their early 30s. They were all alone and generally near a bus stop when the attacks took place. Police say DNA evidence and more than 200 tips led to the arrest. In New York, a woman who was kidnapped from Harlem Hospital when she was just a baby 23 years ago is reunited with her family.
Carlina White was just 19 days old when she was snatched by a woman who was masquerading as a nurse in 1987. Police lost the trail of the kidnapping, but Carlina White said she always felt like something was wrong in her life. After being unable to get a birth certificate from the woman who raised her, she did her own digging. She called the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who sent her pictures of a child that looked like her when she was a baby. She called the New York City police, who conducted DNA tests that proved that she and the kidnapping victim were the same. She spent most of her life just less than 100 miles away in Connecticut. Police have yet arrested the woman who had claimed to be White's mother.
In your Our News Now World Wrap, a former dictator who fled Haiti 25 years ago makes a surprising return to his home country. But the man who is known as Baby Doc is finding out that people in his country are not so willing to forgive or forget. Jean-Claude Duvalier was soon arrested after his arrival and will face charges relating to stealing more than $300 million of Haiti's wealth when he left on February 7th of 1986. Duvalier was a second generation of ironclad rule in that country for 30 years. Baby Doc Duvalier was living in France since his departure, and it's still not clear why he returned. This week marked the one-year anniversary of the deadly earthquake that killed more than 320,000 people there. Haiti's also endured a cholera epidemic, a hurricane, and continues to struggle to find new leadership in the wake of a contested November election that has still not been decided. In Brazil, torrential rains and mudslides continue to take lives in sections of the country near Rio de Janeiro. More than 700 people are dead. More than 200 are still missing. Whole communities have been erased by the landslides and floods that swept through the southeast portion of the country. Thousands of people are still in the affected areas despite the continued threat of more landslides. Many of them claim they refuse to leave their homes vulnerable to looters. Poor urban planning has placed hundreds of neighborhoods in Brazil on dangerous lands that are susceptible to floods and mudslides. The long process of counting up votes in the Sudan is expected to be wrapped up by early February. International observers have said the referendum was conducted in a fair way, and they believe the results will be credible. Millions went to the polls to decide on the separation of the southern Sudan from the rest of the country. The north, which controls the government, is ruled by light-skinned Arabs, while the south is inhabited by dark-skinned Christians and tribal Africans. It's believed the results will mean the creation of a new African nation, but the region, which has been enthralled in a civil war for decades, is expected to see more violence for years to come as border disputes remain unresolved. That's your World Wrap. In business news, despite concerns and even objections over diversity issues, the Federal Communications Commission has approved the merger between Comcast Cable and NBC Universal. The merger would create a super media company, as Comcast would pay $13.8 billion for 51% of NBC stock from General Electric, NBC's parent company. Comcast is already the country's largest cable company, but the deal would require that Comcast make NBC programming free and available to its competitors. And finally, you may not know his name, but if you pick up and read any large newspaper in your community, his actions set the tone for diversity in the newspaper business, a business that had a poor record of racial discrimination. David Hardy died of a heart attack last week. Hardy led a group of 4 daily news reporters in a lawsuit that was the first of its kind in the country to reach a courtroom. Hardy was a political reporter for the newspaper in the 1970s and 80s. He and 3 others accused the Daily News of passing them over for promotions and paying them less than their white counterparts. After a 9-week trial, the predominantly white jury found for the plaintiffs and forced the Daily News to make changes. Hardy was nominated by the News for a Pulitzer Prize for his investigative reporting. David Hardy was 68. For a complete look at any of the stories you've seen on The Rewind, remember, as always, go to the bottom of the webpage, find the link of the story you'd like to see, and click your way through. That's your Our News Now Rewind for this week. I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey.